Women who said no to proposal. What made you say no and what was the outcome? We were 19 and in a crazy on-off relationship. At the time of the proposal we were off, and in my head we were off for good. He came to my house and begged for me to come back, including a tear-filled proposal. I said no, got out of his truck and went back inside. A month later he told me he was going to be a dad. He knocked someone up around the time he wanted me back. Dodge a bullet there. He probably would have told you it was yours. Not me, but my mom. My mom's dad is a pretty successful businessman. My mom was working in some entry-level job in the same industry as my grandpa. The son of the owner of the company my mom worked for was a friend of hers. He asks her to hang out one night, not a date or anything. She had been dating my dad for years at the time, and ends up proposing to her because his dad was a successful businessman, and her dad was a successful businessman. So obviously they should get married. The words good breeding were thrown around. Future children were brought up. Obviously she said no. TLDR. Guy proposes to my mom to genetically engineer super business babies. That guy sounds like Abusive. It was simply a ridiculous suggestion. We had been on and off. He hadn't been speaking to me for months until about a week before the proposal, and we hadn't discussed even dating again, and suddenly he was on one knee with an actual diamond ring. I think men see too many rom-coms too. It was our third date. He had taken me to a fairly average restaurant, which I can no longer return to, had arranged a whole thing with the staff so there was music and flowers and candles and stuff. The place was really busy and everyone stopped to watch, and when I said no he started crying and had to be taken into the back by a couple of the servers. I was asked to leave and not come back, told I was horrible and cruel, etc. LOL. When I was a little kid I didn't understand marriage. Obviously all I knew is you marry someone you love, and I loved my mom so I would always ask her to marry me, and it made me so sad when she would say no. That's adorably cute. We'd been dating long distance for 2 months when he called me and laid out his entire life plan for us. We were to marry immediately. I would graduate school, become pregnant a lot while using my art degree to support our kids and his suddenly desired career in full-time volunteer ministry work. Never mind our religious differences and my already stated intention to remain childless. He didn't propose. Propose implies asking. He just stated it as fact and was honestly surprised when I objected. None of this was in my life plan at all, nor was it discussed between us prior. He broke up with me very shortly afterward, citing my supposed inability to be a reasonable, rational person in light of my rejection of his unilateral propositions. IMHO, if you're ever proposing and not 100% sure that she is going to say yes, then you're doing it wrong. It shouldn't be a surprise. You're not asking someone to the prom. Of course the how and when can be a surprise. Bingo. Did this to my fiancée. She knew I was going to do it, but had no idea the how, the where, or the when. Drove her mad with the lead up, constantly throwing off false ideas too. It was fantastic. Edit. I'm not Jim from The Office. I swear to Christ. I've never even watched it. He was already married, offered to get divorced for me, and asked me multiple times with a ring. I have no idea why in the heck he kept asking. We were co-workers and he saw me as a challenge, I think. So obviously, said no every time. He was already married, offered to get divorced for me, and asked me multiple times with a ring. You should have done his wife a solid and told him you'd only take a proposal seriously after they were divorced. 2 friends in my old high school clique dated for a couple months when we were all 14. We still remained friends after high school, but the guy never got over the girl. He was scary obsessed. Before we all went our separate ways for college, the dude came out of nowhere and asked me once if we were both single by 30 if I would agree to marry him. He was 100% serious. I said no thanks. I wasn't interested in him, and he did it out of desperation and wanting to pee off his ex. Because we were once best friends. He eventually dated a whole bunch of unstable and, not to be cruel, very unfortunate looking women. He had low self-esteem and didn't take care of himself after the breakup. He actually married one a year or so before he turned 30. He spent most of his 20s harassing his old girlfriend and driving by her house playing their song on the radio as loudly as possible. Cops were called. Even at 30, he still stalks his high school ex-girlfriend, my old friend, from time to time and sits outside her place of work staring at her through the window, trying to get her attention. Yet again, she's had to call the cops a number of times. It's really awkward for her because she has to explain to her co-workers, yeah, that's some guy I dated for 2 months when I was a freshman in high school. Can we get him out of here? I said no because I honestly was not prepared for such commitment so early and that fast. We have been seeing each other for about a year. I was 22, he was 24, and was always the super romantic kind of guy. Don't get me wrong, I love this, but he was always rushing things way too early and too soon. Luckily he didn't plan a fancy proposal kind of thing, just surprise asked me at home, so I had to say no then. It didn't take long for us to break up eventually. We'd been dating for 3 years, having some trouble, and he wasn't interested in making any changes to work things out. He basically broke up with me. Turned out I was relieved, then found out he was really just bluffing to teach me a lesson. When he figured out that I was okay with breaking up, he proposed. Really peed me off. I actually responded with, I have a date this weekend. I guess that was a little harsh, but don't propose out of desperation because you screwed up. He basically broke up with me. Turned out I was relieved, then found out he was really just bluffing to teach me a lesson. Oh lord, that sounds like something my ex-BF would do. He was always testing to see how much I loved him, or always tried to catch me in lies. People who do crap like that are annoying. Glad you got out of that relationship. We had been really amazing friends for 5 years. Hooked up in between our separate relationships. Then eventually were truly together for 2 years. I loved him and told him all the time. He never once told me he loved me back. He had been through some crappy relationships and said he just couldn't say that. We were wild, but he was wildest. The drinking was the killer. He only got close to telling me he loved me twice. Each time was fricked up off his butt, and only said, come on, you know how I feel about you. I didn't know if we were just fun or he actually gave a crap. Then I left and found someone that treated me better. That's when he started to really get that I could put up with his crap and still love him like not many could. A few months later he invited me over to talk it out and make things right. He had put together an entire photo album of our years together with a heartfelt letter. He told me he loved me and was starting to go to AA. I hugged him and told him how happy I was for him and that it was sad we had come to this. Should have kept my mouth shut. He said it doesn't have to end, then whips out that box. The box you expect to get excited about, but the fear in my heart and the sadness for us. Ugh. I told him it wasn't a good idea. He needed to get his crap together. I loved him, but our relationship was pretty fricked when we were together. Almost a year later I moved across the country. He showed up, drunk at my door out of the blue. Told me crap was bad. His current GF was stealing from him and shooting up. He couldn't trust her. He wanted to move in with me and make it work. I told him I was so sorry and that he should get away from that and seek professional help. That he's obviously drunk and I can't find a way to make us work, ever, with the drinking. He showed up at my work the next few days drunk. Gets kicked out. I loved him but was so mad with him I told him to go back home and leave me alone. He left. A few days later I get a text saying he's so sorry, that I was always the one for him. I should be with him as his wife. Then he killed himself. Overdose. I love him, even if we were not the best together. I can never forgive myself for getting angry with him. I always wonder, what if I had said yes? Sure, we may be miserable, but he would be alive. This sounds a little like what happened with my cousin, except she did marry the guy. It did not end well. You are grieving, but I think you did the right thing. He was really drunk and I had never met him before. He bought me a drink and then asked the next girl. St. Patrick's Day is a beautiful thing. My co-worker turned down a guy when he proposed to her at work. She turned him down because they had finalized their divorce 2 months prior. I said no because we're not ready. We've been long distance for 3 years now, and although we love each other very much, he knows I won't marry him until we're both settled in together. Still, he asks almost 3 times a week, and it's become a bit of a laugh for us. He tries to sneak the question in without me noticing, and I add ridiculous conditions to my yes. I'm sure that when we decide to get married, he'll be too nervous to actually ask properly. He'll probably end up farting in bed and threatening to Dutch oven me if I don't say yes. It's not all bad in no world. You two sound adorable together. Turned down one guy because we didn't agree on how children should be raised. Turned down another guy because he proposed after I had moved on from our relationship. Friend of a girl with a great story here. She went on a sympathy date with this guy. She thought he was nice but had no interest in him. He took her out for dinner and they had some laughs but nothing came of it. Fast forward a month and he calls and says his sister can't go to prom if she doesn't have supervision. So essentially he said that his mom would let his sister go if he went with her. So obviously my friend goes because he basically was saying if you don't come my sister can't go to prom. Fast forward a week and he comes over out of the blue to her house. He brought a movie and asked if she wanted to watch it. Now my friend is really nice, so she says okay that's fine. They sit down on the couch, no hand holding, no cuddling, strictly platonic film watching. All of a sudden, he drops down on his knee and pulls out a ring and say will you marry me? My friend looked at him and just said, no. What made you think I would say yes? He looks at her completely serious and says, our first date you laughed at my joke and I thought we were destined to be together. Yup, a joke. I don't know what joke, sorry. He put the ring away, finished the movie, then left. They never spoke again. She is doing well now, dating a good guy for some years now. He asked me which Indiana Jones movies I liked. I told him the first and third ones were good, but didn't care for Temple of Doom. This was before the fourth one came out. Right then and there he got down on one knee and proposed to me with the taco he was about to eat. 5 years later we're still dating. Just once I wish a man proposed to me with a taco. One guy, we worked together, never dated until my divorce was final. He asked me to marry him less than 1 month after it was final. Nope. I'm not a woman but I am a man who has been turned down before. I did the whole shebang, even brought roses, but being in the 4th grade probably ruined it for me. I stole my mom's ring and proposed to the Tay on my 2nd grade class. 7-year-old me knew how to appreciate that, but funny thing is my dad did a very similar thing. I was dating a guy during the end of my senior year of high school. I was 18. He was 19. He proposed after a few months of dating. Looking back at it, I think he was afraid I was going to move away to go to college and date other guys. Marriage would have been his way to keep me forever. I said no, because I knew I was too young, and I didn't think he was the kind of person you want to make a life with. We continued to date for a while. We eventually broke up because he was just too insecure. He always talked about how I was going to break up with him eventually for someone better. I took some time off before I started college, but I did have several other boyfriends during college, and after. I wasn't really interested in marriage when I was younger. Now I'm 31, and was married last year. The guy who proposed at 19 is married to someone else with a few kids. I know he proposed to other girls, too. I think he was just the kind of person who desperately wanted to marry anyone, where I was more selective. He asked me after dating for only 5 months, and 2 of those months I had been out of state, so I certainly didn't feel like I knew him well enough to make that kind of commitment. We broke up right after that. About 9 months later he was married to someone else. I think he just wanted to be married and it didn't matter to whom. We started dating 2 weeks into college and dated all through college. It was really rocky the last year or so. Because I didn't have an identity outside of dude's girlfriend I had trouble breaking it off. So I got a second job, enrolled in 18 hours, and decided I would get a 4.0. This was all done so I wouldn't see him as much. The fighting decreased because I was too busy with all that to sweat the small stuff. Well, we stopped fighting because I didn't give a crap anymore. He believed that it was a good sign and popped the question on the way home from his parents' house in Chicago. On the plane. Worst flight ever. It was a good decision because it turned out he already had someone lined up and they were dating within a couple of weeks or so. He got her pregnant I think 3 months after we broke up. Poor thing. I remember that she used to call me about their relationship problems while she was pregnant for his child because I knew him better than she did. It always struck me as insane that she was carrying his child, but also knew that she didn't know him well enough to know when he was lying. Who does that? She was beautiful too, just a wee bit dumb. Got caught up in the DJ Ho mode I guess. Hahaha DJ Ho mode. I can't stop laughing how accurate this is to some of my friends' GFS. It's like they get sucked into this aura of some mediocre, at best DJ and can't get out. I guess the black lights at the frat houses blinded them. I almost feel bad for them. Almost. My mum said no to my dad the first time he asked. Might have something to do with the fact that he called her up exceptionally drunk. His best mate was in the background egging him on do it. When dad got back he had not a clue what he had done. So mum went and bought herself a ring with dad's credit card, gave it to him and then said, now do it properly. I had someone, a friend I'd never dated, propose to me after high school. I kind of laughed it off at first. Where I live, people don't get married that young. But he was devastated, and he kept calling me to ask if I changed my mind. I told him no, and I asked him to move on with his life, but he kept telling me he wouldn't take no for an answer. Unfortunately, I had to get a restraining order against him. We haven't spoken since. I still feel bad about it. We were 19. He proposed with a cubic zirconia ring and pretended to impress me and all of our friends by stating it was real. In general, he was a chronic liar and cheater, very insecure and seemed to be the type who wanted to trap someone into marriage. I was much more insecure and passive then. He got married 2 months ago. Thank God I said no. Nothing wrong with proposing with a ring you can afford, it's the symbol. Pretty rocks are pretty rocks, unless of course you know she strongly believes otherwise. Lying about it is another story. We had been friends since we were kids and knew each other's ins and outs but started going different ways. He got really into the church and I didn't. He called me the night before I graduated high school and told me he'd always been in love with me. He told me it was unlikely anyone else would ever want to marry me because I was damaged goods, referring to a sexual assault and subsequent mental breakdown, and that he would do me the favor of marrying me. He sounded so goddamn sincere too, like he really believed the crap he was spewing. I hung up on him and never answered another call from him. I saw a few months later he married a girl that was 5 years younger than him. I imagine she got a similar proposal. I turned down my first proposal because of the massive insult it was. I'd been dating a girl for a year. Nothing sexual, but a very romantic relationship. I'd made it clear that I was happy as a woman and that I was not transitioning. Early on she thought I was either a drag queen or a pre-op transsexual. I don't look very female dressed. On Valentine's she proposed, and as I was sitting in shock, a happy shock at the specific moment, she mentioned that we could have the wedding as soon as you finish transitioning and the surgery's healed. When I said excuse me she repeated it. I simply got up and walked away. She'd spent a year deliberately ignoring everything I'd said about being a woman. Just ugly. She ignored seeing me naked the once and in bathing suits frequently. She ignored everything people told her about me, because in her mind I was transitioning to male. About a month later, she left town. I think she might be living in BC now. I've gotten cards from someone with her first name with a Vancouver postal code. I mark them no such resident and return them. The name is unusual enough that I'd know if it was family. Besides, I'm now engaged to someone who actually listens. Sometimes. D. Nothing says love like mostly listening to someone. P. After dating for a few months, he went crazy Christian. I still ended up being with him for 3 years, but after he got saved he asked me to marry him because he hated the idea of having sex before marriage, though it didn't stop him. He wanted to elope without telling my parents, so I told him no. It seemed his need for sex was greater than his pride, so he stuck it out with me and made those 3 years the worst relationship I've ever had. I'm not a priest or anything, but it doesn't sound like he was being a very good Christian XD. I've commented about this before, but I said no because we were 15 and I kept trying to leave. The outcome? He chased me through the school, and when we got close to my next class he shouted, "Why so you can frick Zach." That was the end of that relationship. It was too soon. We had only been dating for 9 months. I liked him, but wasn't sure that I was ready for marriage. Plus, I was too young. But we kept dating, and 6 months later moved in together. When he asked a year later, I said yes. Thank goodness he didn't make a production of the first or second proposal. 5 or 6 years ago, in the grocery store, a little girl of 4 or 5 waddled up to me while I was looking over the pasta sauce or whatever and grabbed my leg in the cutest little bear hug ever. I was kind of surprised and looked down, and she said, "Will you marry me?" Her mother came hustling over and apologized. She was mortified. It made my night. Not to sound creepy, but I think about those two every now and again. I hope they are doing okay, wherever they are. Not me personally, but one of my close girlfriends. She was dating this guy for 8 years. He proposed. She said no because he wasn't going anywhere with his life. Not sure if true. I only know he's been working in a retail store for years and gained a lot of weight. Her saying no was just too hard to recover from, and they broke up. He's been doing a Facebook rampage about her, starting to work out and stuff, while she found someone who she seems to love dearly. I once said not yet, because we were 18. That was why. We were kids. He was my first boyfriend, my first kiss. You have to be pretty sure, or dumb, to say yes to that. But I said yes shortly after and we're 31 now and happily married. Technically my wife said what no after I surprised her with a ring, but she ended up marrying me anyway, so I don't think she meant it. My ex asked me after we had broken up. He thought if he asked me to marry him, I'd realize he was mature and I'd come back to him. I said no and told him to get out of my house. I found out from a blabbermouth but fortuitously so friend of ours that he was planning to propose over a trip, and the first thing I thought was I wonder how I'd make sure I kept the dog in the divorce. So, since I couldn't get the money back for the trip, which was like 2-3 days from finding this out, I waited until we got on the plane, got fake drunk, and fake railed against the institution of marriage, saying how glad I was that we were both evolved beyond such a stupid ritual. Looking back, it was a really immature way to handle it, but it was effective, and we still had a good trip, at least better than if we had been out like 4K on the trip. Buy travel insurance, kiddies. 6 years later he's been married and divorced twice. He's really not a bad guy, but I don't think he's built for long-term relationships, and our dog is now my dog. I'd been dating this guy for 2 years when I left him. I was 19. We didn't have a healthy relationship in the slightest. He was horribly mentally and emotionally abusive. I wasn't allowed to have friends, couldn't work and other various typical abuse things. Well, about 2 months before I was set enough to leave him, I discovered he'd been cheating on me for 5 months. And the girl ended up getting pregnant. When I did eventually leave him, I just walked in the house from visiting a friend and just went, "I'm getting a bag of clothes," and then I'm gone. We're over, I'm not doing this anymore, and then I left without letting him speak because I knew he'd try and convince me to stay. Well, the next morning he shows up to my friend's house where I was staying and asks if we can talk. Well, instead of talking, he handed me this journal I'd been keeping and forgot at his house because he wrote some terrible apology about how much he loves me and needs me in his life. The last thing on the page was just, "Will you marry me?" and I literally laughed out loud. Gave him the journal back and said, "You're freaking kidding me, right?" and went back inside my friend's house. A month or so later he tried telling me that we should be on speaking terms in case we're ever in the same place, which sounds rational, except he hated all of my hobbies and my friends, so there's no instance in which we'd be in the same place. He'd also message me periodically saying he found some random bulls of mine and wanted to know if I wanted him to bring it to me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.